Oh, this is cool. I wanted to know your take on fashion not being a performance anymore, like Galliano Dior and McQueen in the 2000s. Do you think investors aren't taking chances on young, crazy designers anymore? Yes. So you basically answer the question, but there's a reason why. There's a financial reason why. So if we go back and think of when these massive brands and conglomerates were taking a chance on young designers, young new designers, they could do that because there wasn't really much at stake. If you think of someone like Marc Jacobs was essentially the first ready to wear designer at Louis Vuitton, right? So, because of that, it was an untapped market. They really didn't know how good the ready to wear could really do. And so, Marc Jacobs basically built the ready to wear business from the ground up to wherever it was. So, it could have been not any designer because Marc Jacobs was really good, obviously, and he had iconic moments. But what I mean is, any talented designer could have been switched for Marc Jacobs in the sense that it's not that hard to go from like the bottom to somewhere. Obviously, Marc Jacobs took it to crazy heights, but maybe another talented designer wouldn't make as much as Marc Jacobs, but you would take it from very low to a few million or something like that. So that's why they could take a chance on designers because there wasn't much at stake. Fast forward to now, a lot of these brands are billion-dollar companies. Therefore, you can't really take as many chances because if you have a designer that isn't really that talented and can't really sell garments and doesn't know how to make desirable bags the way Marc Jacobs could, this is a brand that already, like Louis Vuitton, made 20 billion in a single year, like annual revenue. Do you know how insane that is? So you're taking a brand like that and then you're trying to grow even further than that. So first of all, you need a designer that can make products that are so desirable, you stay making all those billions. Then you need them to be able to build on that and make even more money for the brand with desirable products. It's damn near an impossible task. So when you think of luxury being in that position, that's why you can't take a chance anymore. That's why you can't have the freedom that John Galliano had. That's why you can't have the freedom of Marc Jacobs literally getting them to fly out a whole train track and turn it into a runway and stuff like that. Like, you're just not really going to see that. Brands are also trying to cut corners. Those shows were really expensive. They don't really want to spend that much money on shows anymore because it messes with profit margins. So there are all these different things. That's why I think if we want to see fashion return back to the golden age, I think we just need to see these luxury brands for what they are. I think the golden age of all these big luxury brands like the Louis Vuittons, the Gucci's, the Dior's, that's over. All of that will always be in the past because of the financial position they find themselves in. They have no choice but to keep trying to grow because they have shareholders that they are beholden to. And if they don't grow, shareholders sell their stock, the stock price tanks, the company suffers, and it's a spiral. So they're in no man's land at this point. So really, if you want to see good fashion, we have to support the brands that are up and coming that don't have those financial strongholds and they're not being strangled by all these financial constraints and all these shareholders and stuff. That's the only way. That's the only way, to be honest. What changes outside of changing creative directors do you think will make big luxury houses exciting or interesting again, or do you think the glory days are over? Okay, yeah, so I just answered that question. I think the glory days are in the past. Like, they're all in the past because of the financial constraints that they are in, to be honest. I don't think we're going to see that sort of stuff. Luke is saying, also there are just less designers like Galliano and McQueen around now. The kind of fashion education they receive and fashion culture they grew up doesn't exist anymore. So I do not agree with this at all, Luke, because when I was at CSM, I saw so many collections from designers that I was like, this is so insane. You need to start a brand, or like someone needs to support this work because this is so good. Unfortunately, a lot of designers that I felt that way about, some of them had no intentions to start a brand and they won't. And I understand because financially they can't afford to. And then secondly, they just work for brands because financial security, once again. So they use that as a portfolio and then work for brands, and then those ideas never get developed. That's very different to Galliano's time or McQueen's time, when literally Galliano had his graduate collection and everyone was talking about it, and the chatter went to Anna Wintour, and then Anna Wintour started whispering in Bernard Arnault's ear that there's this guy called John Galliano, you should really check him out, you should hire him at some point. Fashion just doesn't function that way anymore. Fashion is, I don't care how good you are as a designer, in today's fashion landscape, there's no graduate designer that's just going to go straight from a graduate collection to a house like Dior. Well, not that Galliano went to Dior, he went to Givenchy, but still, I don't even think that's going to happen now. I just don't think the way the industry functions now, that's possible. Because once again, the money that they're playing with, they can't take risk like that anymore. So I don't agree with that. I definitely see a lot of designers' work that I'm like, this is actually really, really amazing. They just don't have the support that, McQueen had Isabella Blow and stuff. There aren't designers having these kind of people straight out of the gate versus that generation, because that generation you had, obviously I've talked about Galliano, I've talked about McQueen, you had Stella McCartney, who's just rich from the get-go, so she could afford to do that. And obviously there was the buzz around her graduate collection because Kate Moss and Naomi Campbell walked in the show. Like, I just think it's just a different fashion climate right now, if anything. I don't think it's to do with designers not being as good. I don't agree with that. Let's see. So do you think that if the fashion industry had been so financially driven as it is now in the 80s or 90s, young designers like McQueen back then wouldn't have gotten a chance? Oh yeah, 100%. He wouldn't. He wouldn't, because it would be seen as too risky to put someone like McQueen, especially the themes that McQueen used to talk about through his shows, especially the early shows, which are very, violent in nature and dark and, talking about themes of war and death. And I just don't think there would be a space for that sort of stuff with McQueen. I don't think so. I don't think so. Insane doesn't mean good. When I say insane, I mean good. Those two created clothes that were conventionally attractive and complemented a female form. CSM has moved buildings. Most of these old tutors are dead or gone. First of all, I don't think you can say all of Galliano's clothes complemented a female form. I don't agree with that. Secondly, no. There are many designers at CSM that make clothing that is very complementary to the female form. You just don't see them because their collections are not broadcast the way that, they're not on Vogue Runway. They're not being covered by journalists and stuff. And a lot of these people didn't develop their work because immediately after university, they go and work at brands because there isn't the same ecosystem to help build these designers. So yeah, he said, I will die on this hill. Don't die on that hill, Luke. There are some very, very good designers that I've seen. They just don't have support and they stop designing. I've seen so many of them over the years. You can die on the hill if you want to, but I don't agree with you. Hanifa started when she barely knew how to sew. Also, if you save enough money, you can definitely start with manufacturers, but learn the technical stuff in the meantime. Yeah, for sure. And I think in any job, you never stop learning, right? So, I mean, if I thought I knew everything, I wouldn't still be reading books and reading reports and articles every day, right? I think everyone needs to learn. So the same way that I'm always reading reports and case studies and stuff is the same way that if you're a designer, you should always, so long as you stay a designer, you should forever be learning new techniques, learning about different fabrics, learning how to manipulate things a certain way. I think the learning never ends. So yes, you can have a starting point, but I think just continue learning. It's fine to continue learning. Luke is saying, do you not think it's a total contradiction to say that there are still many talented designers around, and in the same breath that fashion is now completely uninspiring? Talent emerges in spite of money. No, Luke, it's not a contradiction, and I'll explain to you why it's not a contradiction. The reason why I can say that Balenciaga would dominate in this era is because Balenciaga has a huge body of work that I can reference in my head to be like, let me compare it with designers that are at big houses now. Okay, cool, he would decimate them. The designers that I'm talking about that are talented they're not in vogue like Cristobal Balenciaga was. They have no name, they're not prominent. This whole, talent emerges in spite of money is not really true because you need money for talent to emerge. The only reason why John Galliano and McQueen emerged is because they had people that supported them, and that's where the money comes in. Without patrons, you can be as talented as you want. If you're not from a rich family, your work is just going to go unseen forever. That's just how it is. Like, even Balenciaga had patrons. I mean, this whole talent emerges in spite of money is just not true. That's not true. All the people that we know that are big designers, there's a financial aspect to the reason why we know they're big designers. There was a marketing machine behind making them the designers that they are today. It's not just about talent. Talent isn't enough to be big enough nowadays. So it's not a contradiction at all, actually, for me to say, oh yeah, Balenciaga decimate, because that's actually a name we know. I can't reference a designer that might have been as good as Balenciaga but was unknown because instead of being in France, they lived in Ukraine. So no one saw their designs, even though they were making really good stuff. And people that lived there at that time knew that they were the best designers in the country. So it's not a contradiction at all. But why then are the sponsored people talentless? Because, so you need to remember that in like Cristobal Balenciaga's time, his patrons were people that appreciated a designer that was revolutionary and pushed fashion forward. Nowadays, people that have a lot of money don't really value stuff like that. What people that have a lot of money now value when it comes to fashion and business is just money and profit, and that's it. Whereas back then, people actually cared about, okay, we're trying to make a profit, but we're also just going to allow you to be, you know, as creative as you need to be, right? So it's just different. It's just different. It's not like talent doesn't sell. It just doesn't sell billions. So if you wanted a brand that is really revolutionary and pushing fashion forward and using all these techniques we've never seen before, at the height of what they are, they could definitely be $1 million brands. But to make a brand $1 billion brand, you have to water it down. You have to almost decimate it. You have to root everything. You have to uproot everything from the soil and start again. You have to go from making really intricate couture dresses to making cheaply made print t-shirts and selling them for $1,000. That's the way that you make a brand super, super expensive. Sorry, make loads of money. That's the only way. So it's not like talent doesn't sell. Talent can sell, but talent is not going to create $1 billion brands. I think the problem with this kind of conversation is the way that we see fashion. I think the biggest issue is we expect talent, or we are expecting the best talent to be at the biggest houses. But I think that's the wrong way to think about it, because in the golden age of fashion, at the height of all these couturiers, none of these people had $1 billion brands. They just made the best clothing that they could make, and they didn't really make loads and loads of money. The only person that really made loads of money was Coco Chanel, and that was because she was good at business and she had like perfumes and stuff. But apart from that, couturiers weren't really making loads of money. It was more about craft. Everyone appreciated the craft collectively. I think we're just looking at the wrong places. I think once we agree that the biggest houses are uninspiring and they are prisoners of their own success, we can then have a more constructive conversation about, okay, what brands are being revolutionary and where should we look to? Like Kane and Amia. Let's check out Kane and Amia. Kane and Amia is, to me, is as talented as a lot of the designers that we've mentioned in the past, but Kane and Amia is not given the same like fashion industry media push that a lot of these people are being given. I've been to so many museum exhibitions and I've seen Kane and Amia's design techniques and I'm like, this is so revolutionary. Like, this is insane. This is so much better than what all the luxury brands are doing, but no one really talks about it. So that's what I mean. Once we can collectively understand that, you know, these massive houses, that's not where the creativity is, look elsewhere, that's when we will literally understand. Do you think we can still grow a business without a business-to-business channel to the size of all the big houses have? No. But why do you want, like, not saying you, by the way, but why do people in general want brands the size? Why? Why do people want to build brands that are $20 billion brand? Like, why? Why is that people's goal? Like, well, definitely you can't grow a business to that size without a business-to-business channel. Definitely not. But why is that like the goal for a lot of designers? Exactly this. Innovation is only interesting to investors if it can guarantee profit. So I just think, yeah, sometimes these conversations aren't very helpful because I feel like the basis of these conversations is on the basis that creativity still happens at these big houses, but it doesn't really. It doesn't.